So we're walking the cliff's edge right now. We're walking the cliff's edge of, are you willing to challenge certain things that sit within your current frame of how you define reality? Now, we are discussing aspects of an out-of-print book from an event that happened on July 4th, 1950. This is called the White Sands Incident. Happened down in Las Cruces, New Mexico, at the White Sands Proving Ground, which is a military installation for testing prototypes of rockets and other special things like that for the government. There's a gentleman, Dr. Fry, who found himself wandering down a dirt road, which we have plenty of in New Mexico.
Down the only road he ever known. Like a drifter, he was
born to walk alone.
Sorry.
I love Whitesnake. And so he's walking there. It's late in the evening. And then he, through a series of events, becomes startled at the fact that he's face to face with a obloid spherical craft that's sitting in front of him. And we are laying out sort of the philosophical approach that he has that opens this up before we get into the rest of that story. And I can tell you the next steps he takes in his own interaction. So,
yes.
So go ahead.
So we'll go back to the book, and you need to listen to the first one because these are part 1, part 2, so forth, on this out-of-print book that we absolutely love. It seems to be amazing. Yeah. So he said the only reason such craft have not been developed before is that Earthmen have only recently come to realize that such propulsion is possible. So
we have to stop right there. First of all, what did he call the people of Earth?
Such craft have not been developed before is that Earthmen.
Earthmen.
Yes.
Oh, so men must exist somewhere else. If the fact that you have to specify that Earthmen are doing something as opposed to other planetary or interplanetary men, there's a difference. That specificity has to come from somewhere. Nobody talks like that.
No, exactly. And we'll get into this. And he said, throughout history, man's stumbling block has been his refusal to recognize that something is possible. So, and we talked about that in the last episode, the stumbling block. But it is his refusal to recognize that something is possible. And this part is that hit me. Because it's funny how people need to understand this. When you read a book, like you read a book, you highlight stuff. I read the book, I may get something different from it. That's the beautiful part about books. This is what really struck me was the next sentence. Nobody underlined this, but I would have. Once he recognizes that something is possible, it isn't long before he actually does it.
Do you know what? I didn't underline it, but you know what it reminded me of?
It's a really basic quote, but it's deep, actually.
Remember Usain Bolt?
Yes.
He cracked that certain speed on, I don't know if it was the 100 meter or something, then everybody starts cracking it. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And this happens everywhere with everything, technology, sports, it doesn't matter, you name it. Once people receive the frame of reference and see that it is in fact a part of the reality, it's not something that's so challenging anymore. The consciousness can actually adapt to that idea and then adopt it rather than say that's completely impossible. It would never happen.
Well, you remember, and we encourage people to subscribe if you like technology and stuff like this. You subscribe to our TCast podcast from Tartle, one of our sponsors, but we do a podcast on just technology, AI, all that stuff. We had Lindsay Pollock on the other day, and this goes right with this quote. She said she learned from someone that they wanted to be a professor at a university.
Yes.
And so she's like, oh, wow, it looks so easy for her. She got this great job and all that stuff. But what the lady told her was she applied at 100 places.
Yeah.
100 universities. And she got one.
Yeah.
So this whole idea is once you grasp this idea of, yeah, it's going to be a lot of hard work, but I can realize the potential of this. It's like Elon Musk. The only reason he's been able to do what he's doing is because he actually has this idea in his head that he's going to Mars. So Mars is way up here.
It's the zeal. Remember we talked about this? What's your idea of where you want to be?
Yeah.
Then you'll figure out any path to get yourself there.
So doing the moon and doing all this, launching satellites is really low key compared to his Mars vision.
Yeah, that's what he wants.
So
these are preliminary steps to get to the end goal.
Yeah. So and recognizing that things are possible, he said, is one of the things that Fry appeared to be getting at, and that he wanted his students to enlarge the scope of their reality.
Yeah, because when you look at...
And we're going to get into a quote here in a second. Then.
If you were to look at reality in the sense that anything is possible, albeit improbable, but possible, the flexibility and the willingness of your mind to think beyond limiting parameters becomes unlimited. Then real creativity can flourish at that point. And you'd be able to see or solve things that otherwise other people wouldn't do because they say it's not possible.
So Dr. Fry learned this from, because I feel like before we make the statement, we need to understand, just as Raw and Billy Myers and all these, that he took a little, and we don't need to get into details, but he took a little trip.
Yep.
And he learned a lot.
Yeah.
And so these statements that he's making are from?
They're from a 30-minute flight from Las Cruces to New York and back. And then the progression of 2 years later after having a contact up in Northern California with the same individual. That's what it was.
So, because
it was very limited time,
right,
but immensely profound on his perspective. You know, people live their entire lives waiting for an epiphany, waiting for something to be that aha moment, whatever the hell it might be, right? Oh, the king's crown, blah, 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 displacement of water, all that good stuff. When you are offered an experience, it's your choice then at that moment. Do I look at this as the epiphany? Do I look at the truth in this, and do I allow it to refine, reframe, and open up my programming that has essentially locked me down for a great majority of my life? You have to make a choice at that moment when you are faced with things that would typically sit outside of your scope of what you would coin as reality or possible. And with the very, very brief amount of time that he had, this is something that completely changed his entire aspect and outlook and the amount of confidence he had in himself to share this story for the rest of his time.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. I was talking to someone a couple of days ago, and I asked them, what is the most peaceful time you've ever had in your life? A moment. Like, because we were talking about Kairos and Chronos, you know?
Yeah.
And we did a whole episode on that. And I said this Kairos, this moment of like super peace. And I ask a lot of people that, and it's been, you know, from snowboarding with my dad in the mountains when I was young to having a child, you know, in that moment to, you know, experiencing, you know, being out in nature and then, you know, seeing something unexplained and having this warmth overwhelmed you, you know, there's lots of different, but what I was thinking is every moment that a person's told me, because I've probably asked 10 people this, and I always ask people this question because I think it's really interesting. Every time they've ever told me what they view as their most peaceful, that's their reality. Most peaceful, it's always something that expanded their reality. You know, they're attaching an emotion to it because peace is kind of an emotion, you know. But it's always something like having a child is scary. It's fearful. It's your body's going through a huge, you know, childbirth is one of the biggest things that you can have happen. I mean, we all know the biological aspect of it, what it does. I mean, you can actually die from it, and there's lots of, so that being the most peaceful is bringing creation into life, you know, bringing this being into life, or, you know, having a relationship with your father and he passed away and you're going back and remembering that, you know, it's just people, the peaceful moments that people talk about are always things that expanded their reality and that they were kind of fearful of, but they overcame it and then they felt peace. You see what I'm saying?
I am like,
because I'm trying to level at this reality section.
You know, this is quite funny. When I consider that for myself, and I think I really do think you're onto something here. There are points when I've injured myself or been in some pretty like bad situations. And I would say that in that point of harm or that point before fear settles in, you feel this weird, deep peace.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're forced in that moment to find a deep-seated honesty within yourself. You know, whether I got in an accident or something, and I'm having a conversation in my head that says, you know, you fucked up. Like, you shouldn't have been doing that. And like, here's a repercussion of it. But in that weird moment of knowingness is where you do find that peace.
But don't you think, this is, and I don't want to delve too much in this, but don't you think that the reason you're feeling peace, to me, is that you're experiencing ultimate truth?
Yeah. Because in ultimate truth, you feel that expanse. there are no barriers. There's no restriction. It's almost like you're allowed to settle into what has been asking you to settle into it. Right?
It's an acceptance of reality.
Yeah. And that's what I mean. Like those points when I hurt myself and stuff like that, you know, we all have thought we've been invincible at some point, but that peace settles in there, right? Because you have to accept the reality that it's just not true.
Yeah, because there's not peace when you were rowing and you're looking at the other boat and you're ahead of them and you know you're going to win by a boat length or something, half boat length, however that's not peaceful.
No.
You know, maybe before when you're sitting on the, you know, peace is a weird word.
It's not, peace is like,
even though you may be happy and elated that you won,
that's not what it is.
That's still not.
And peace isn't like, the birds are chirping, all this other stuff. It's not it.
That's joy.
It's this other frame that is happening in an immaterial sense within yourself, where all the other trains of thought stop, and like time dilates for a moment, and you forget about everything else because so much honesty has asked you to settle into this moment that you're in, and that's where the peace is found.
So my conclusion on it, I may be wrong, is that that's true meditation.
That is true meditation, because I'm not having
total self-awareness.
Total self-awareness. I'm not having thoughts. I'm not trying to push things out there. I'm literally just being what is by itself and finding that peace. Let the things roll.
So the reason I brought that up is because because everything goes hand in hand and there's puzzle pieces to life. And this quote is the one that you sent me that fucked me up for the week. I still keep thinking about it. This is so great. We're going to dissect this. He says, and stop me, reality has no boundaries. Let's just stop right there. Reality has no boundaries. Because I don't want to get into this whole like, oh, there's no such thing as reality. And, you know, it's all like a matrix and it's all, you know, which there may be some parts to programming of that, but reality has no boundaries.
Creation is creative, right? And remember how he said if you can submerge certain aspects that limit your view on reality, if you can remove those barriers that say things are not possible, well, if I have an infinite expanse of space and an infinite amount of interactions and cause and effects and all these things mixing with one another, these probabilities overlap. Anything is actually possible at that point. So the infiniteness of reality actually lives within the fact of creation creating all the time.
The infiniteness of reality lives in the expansion of the whole universe.
That's correct.
And so as it's building upon itself and keeps, you know, building and building and building, which they say that it does.
Yeah.
You know, there's a theory for that. Then wouldn't it be the same as our reality?
That's precisely correct, because you are confined by the universe itself. You don't live outside of it, do you? You live inside of it. It's not a simulation. It just is what it is. And because you can't see most of it, does not mean that it's not there. Does not limit the possibility or the probability of something. It's naturally infinite within itself. It's constantly expanding. It lives within cycles. Just look at nature around you. It doesn't go in a fine line and then drop off. The earth is not flat and then you fall off on a ship. It's round, spherical. Time, everything else, space acts in that same function of what you witness. A light photon, does it blow around as a square? No. It has that roundness to it. It carries that timeless shape. There is the timelessness. It's expanded within itself. It's infinite. It has those fractals baked into it. We only define a measure as a measure to say this laptop here is 13 inches.
Right.
Well, that's because someone defined what we accept as a standard measure.
Well, it's like on Twitter right now, there's two countries. I'm not for sure where it's at. I should have read a little bit more on it, but I did skim the article. There's two countries fighting over a flag. Like that one says it's their flag, the other says their flag. And so there are actually violence over this. And it's like, reality has no boundaries. Like a boundary, like whenever you put something that's...
we look at our map.
Well, think of the root word bound.
Yeah. When you're binding something, what happens to its free will, its movement, everything? It's restricted. You limit growth at that point. If you don't want to be a global citizen, if you don't want to think, act, walk, and talk like a global citizen, well, then you live in a state of bounds. You live in a state where your free will is hindered. Not by somebody else, but you've essentially given them that power to hinder your own free will. Because you say, I want to define myself as someone that's from Angola or China or India or Kazakhstan or Canada or America. That's your choice. But how unrealistic to say that there's a line in the sand that specifically says it starts and stops here. For what? Says who? It's just because people think that they can own resources, you know? And then when you look at those ideas of like owning resources, well, who's to say you own anything? Because in the end, at the end of the day, creation gave it for everybody to use, right?
Yeah, we're borrowing
Does it pick and choose who's good and bad, black or white, American or non-American? No, it doesn't care. We just come up with these false ideas, these false senses of reality that we think define what really exists, but it's like an approach to our own research and science. We say that this is the limit we work within. This is the truth. Well, this self-defined, self-imposed truth, this ruler that we put on everything, right, to say this is 10 inches, legitimately and illegitimately, it exists and does not exist at the same time. It exists in our mind, but in the sense of all of creation itself, what are you talking about? Does it measure itself? Do you see a ruler on a tree? Does a photon say, oh, I've just done this and this? No. We're just trying to reconcile things through time. But the thing is, we need to always have this idea that we have to constantly arrest the natural flow and movement of nature. We have to stop the flow of people, stop the flow of nations and ideas with borders. These things create those problems. Nationalist pride causes people to hurt and kill one another. Why? Because we refuse to understand because of some imaginary boundary that defines somebody else as the other.
And that's the problem. Not a community of one.
No, it's not a community of one. It's a community of many.
And he says, reality has no boundaries. It is not small nor limited. It is infinite. And that's just what we talked about.
It's not small, right? Because smallness it wouldn't work with infiniteness. It could be infinitely small or infinitely large. So it's just infinite within itself, right? It's not small and it's not bounded. If you have an equation that's bounded, it can't be infinite. It can't accept all other probabilities. And if you think about that, if there was a limit to creation itself, there's a point when things stop. There's a point where you can be like, oh, here is the upper limit. This is the maximum threshold for our evolution. Well, if you know there's a maximum threshold, why evolve then? What's the point? If things are capped, why keep going? Why work harder?
That's so good. Yes. Limited is the problem with humanity, is that we limit things.
Everything.
Yeah. To grasp a reality.
You know what's a shame? People are like, oh, people are billionaires. Is that the upper limit? Not in my mind.
No.
Not even close.
We have $1 trillion companies now.
Yeah. If a company's $1 trillion, why can't a person be worth $1 trillion?
Yeah. It's
right.
So people draw. This is the part that really is going to mess you guys up.
Guys, this is just the intro.
People draw a circle around what they consider to be real. But all that circle shows is a level of consciousness they have reached.
Really?
That's what fucked me up.
I
like when shit hits me hard. Like when I like to get like jackhammered. Like
I love it when it wails on me.
Yeah, when a statement just like pummels you.
Yeah, that's why.
That's what the statement did, dude. When I read that, I was like, I am so fucked up.
That's why I had to send it to you. That's why Amanda looked at me. She's like, "Why are you grumpy?" And I'm like, "I'm really not grumpy. I'm just this book is like really messing me up." You know what I mean? Think about
people draw a circle.
Here's a really this is great.
You're drawing it.
I get it. Yeah.
People draw a circle around what they consider to be real.
This is great.
Let's stay there.
This is fantastic. Say I dumped down a map of the universe, and I said, "Draw a circle where you are." They're like, "Oh, I don't know where I am."
And just they draw a little circle around, like I would draw a little circle around Albuquerque.
Yeah,
that's where I'm at.
Oh, that's where you are.
Oh, Google Maps, you are here.
Yeah. So, and then I would ask the next question: what happens about everything outside of that circle? Do you think about it? Even if an event is occurring outside of this local circle, maybe it's a 50-mile radius for you. Do those probabilities affect you?
Do we think about Ebola outbreaks in Africa?
No, you don't.
That kill, 40% of the people?
Because your idea is always a material geographic distance.
Mm-hmm.
And that anything that happens outside of that couldn't possibly have an effect on who I am. So my idea of reality sits within a 50-mile radius. And everywhere I travel, that radius shifts with me. And I can't really think outside of that. Why? Because you limit your ideas. You try and bound creation. And when you do that, you bind your mind. You hinder the interconnectedness, the fabric of the things that actually bring us together. The earth is a closed system. So if I asked you to circle your reality, I would ask that you circle the entire earth, because what happens in here stays on here. And whatever the probability is, it will come back around sooner or later.
Yeah, I was thinking when I thought of this quote, I thought of, you remember those old school 1960s, because this book's from 1960s, so
Yeah.
my brain always works. Remember those old school like panel vans in like the 60s and stuff, 60s and 70s? And they had like the Dodge made one where it's like a flat nose.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, real ugly.
Oh, hideous.
People pay all the money for them now. But I thought about, people draw a circle around what they consider to be real, but all this is all that circle shows is the level of consciousness they have reached. So I thought about saying, okay, I'm going to go into this van, and it's a panel van, so I can't see around me.
Right.
But I have 2 windows and 1 window in the front. As long as I'm driving, I can move forward, blah, blah, blah. But I'm going to go sit in the back of this van and then hang out back there, and I feel protected because no one knows I'm there, so I can kind of hide, like that van could sit there as long as there's AC on or whatever, or the windows down. If I got food, I'm fine. But I can kind of like hide in my own little, no one can see me. So there's this whole idea of drawing the circle for safety and protection and for comfort, because especially here in the United States, that's what we live for. I mean, we actually live our life for comfort. Like we will choose not to do hard things because they're hard. Yeah. And you have to do hard things to evolve. But do you know what I mean? Like, because we in our own will draw the circle.
All the time. We define what our limit is. We don't realize that it's unlimited. We've just been told that there's a maximum, right? So my consciousness in its growth and its own evolution will be limited to what I think my bound is. And if you think that you're boundless, you can do many, many things. Learn many, many languages. Understand many, many people.
It's like the show, I think it had, or the movie Limitless with...
that was great film.
Yeah, but it's like you have that pill.
All the time.
You don't need a drug or something external. It's internally. That Limitless internally is in you.
Yeah, and it happens in the consciousness. So I think we just get so absorbed with the material and thinking that the material has a limit. We're always thinking resources are limited. This is limited. This is this and that. You got to have one or the other. That is just not how things work. We create these natural paradoxes that don't really exist. There's no reality to that paradox. You just think there is because you lack the understanding of creation itself.
And how thought creates.
All the time.
Because he's going to get into that here in a second in the book. But when you expand that circle and you allow yourself to be creative and you allow that thought process to move, like we'll use like Elon Musk saying, I'm going to Mars. It's like, what? Why pick Mars? Why do all this stuff? Maybe sci-fi, maybe when he was a kid or whatever. It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
He's like, here's what I'm doing. I have, I think he's kind of close to the richest guy in the world.
And you know who's going to show up? Okay, Mars is great. Let's go to Venus.
Yeah, exactly.
And then it's going to go one after another because once someone shows that it can be done. But the thing is, your thoughts will be limited by the bounding you have on that thought.
Yes.
You will never think beyond that circle because you drew the circle in the first place. Don't draw it. Let it grow. Or have an idea that it is something that is ever expanding.
Yeah, and he talks about the rapidly rising curve of scientific development. And he calls it the curve of development.
Yeah. He wrote a book on this.
Yeah, and he says, 10 years is in the last 100 years. And we see this exponential growth that's going on and on and on. The problem that I worry about, and we both read the Anti-Fragile book. When you have fragile systems that are, when you have exponential growth, you have to be very, very careful. So, Weyerhaeuser figured this out with Douglas fir trees.
Right.
They started juicing them, like giving them steroids.
And
then they found out, I can get a really tall tree that's 40 feet in the air in like 20 years.
Yep.
But the quality of the lumber, the root system
diminishes greatly.
Then they got insects and diseases susceptible to, so it wasn't anti-fragile.
No, you've weakened it because you thought making something bigger in size denotes strength. There are very, very many tiny things that are more closely knit together. Consider an ant colony. The structure of those individuals are very strong within themselves. It doesn't have to be something big and boastful, right? So if you talk about that curve and you don't want your system to be fragile, you need to make sure that as your technology grows, it's from a fundamentally strong base. Otherwise, you'll exponentially grow something off of a platform of sand. And we know how sand shifts with time and wind.
So he says this at the end of the introduction, which I thought was really cool because a lot of authors don't do this. He says, in sincere appreciation of your interest in the subject of UFOs, I want to thank you for buying and reading this book. How many authors have done that? In sincere appreciation.
They always like, I write this book for Sammy and Joe.
Yeah.
But do you actually appreciate the fact that someone took the time to search you out, pick it up, and even read the introduction? Think about it.
So he's showing sincere appreciation, and then he's thanking people for buying and reading the book. I just thought that was really cool. I've never seen an author do that, in such a just clear and concise statement. Yeah,
I was at the dentist earlier, and this is how on this episode. There's the two women are there, and they're like fixing my mouth. And I said, before we got this, I just want to say I want to thank both of you for taking care of me. I don't think that anyone's ever said that to them. They were so effing shocked. But I was being genuine. I mean, like, you're in my mouth, you're doing all this stuff, you had drills going and stuff like that. Like, thank you for taking care of me.
Yeah, could you imagine if we did that, if everyone did that more? Like there used to be that pay forward thing, where you'd pay for the person behind you at Starbucks line or whatever.
Right.
People were doing stuff. But it's just those kind words, and how Ra talks about that a lot. Like love, light, that's light.
It's big time light.
Yeah, and it's just you being genuinely and sincere.
Yeah, like
thankful.
If I go to Whole Foods and somebody chooses to bag for me, I'm legitimate. I'm like, thank you very much for bagging for me, so that I didn't have to do the effort.
Yeah,
thank you. They're like, yeah, no, like, absolutely, no problem. But the dentist was just like shocked. The thing is, people go through these processes,
right?
But when they get hit with something like that that's so genuine, they have to pause for a moment. They're like, oh wow. Oh, that feels a little bit different. This process is not the same every single day, right? People view things a lot differently, and I think that changed for them in that moment.
So if you love UFOs, we encourage you to, we have a bunch of episodes on UFOs, or what are they calling them now? I forget. The government.
UAP, unexplained aerial phenomenon.
Yeah, they changed the name so it wouldn't be so.
The WEP.
Yeah.
WAP.
But we want to thank you for listening, sincerely.
Yeah.
And we encourage you to, we really want to get our subscription up on YouTube. So if you're just listening to this, through Apple or Spotify or whatever, make sure you go on YouTube and push a little subscribe button. That helps us get our reach out for YouTube.
Oh, and you are buying a car right now.
Mm-hmm.
Or in the process. Who are you getting it from?
Quality Mazda.
Oh, Quality Mazda.
Our sponsor, yeah.
So how's that going?
Great. I have the car here. I haven't been pressured. I'm looking at it.
You literally have the car in your hands.
Yeah, I have it. I'm like driving it around.
Yeah.
No worries. I text and ask a few questions.
Mm-hmm. And what do? They educate you, and they wait. It's when you want to make the decision.
Right. And then I looked at some credit unions and some banks and stuff like that. So just it's just a very easy, chill process, which I enjoy. And I did not go to the dealership once with the buying process part.
No. But you're in the car and going through the process.
Yeah, they brought it. They brought it here, and they will even bring your paperwork to the house and go over it with you.
QualityMazdaNM.com
and Turtle.co.
Turtle.co. If you're interested in sharing your data, earning money, and changing the world, there's only one place to go.